everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Sister Circle Media. And also, thank you for catching the after show of Sister Circle for the Soul with Jennifer Anderson. We are going to talk about some of the things that we got into because we realize that space is sacred and there are people that say things and we want to make sure that it's a trusted space. So we don't record that session, but we do record this one so that you don't miss out. With that being said, all further ado, I just want to introduce and give Jennifer an opportunity to say hello.
Hey guys, Jennifer Anderson here. Thank you so much, Erin, for that intro and for setting the context. It's a pleasure to speak with everyone. I'm the host of Sister Circle for the Soul, and Erin is the producer extraordinaire. And we are in that space to really give an opportunity to provide an outlet for professional development, as well as an opportunity to discuss topics that are relevant to us. As Erin said, when we are in those live sessions for Sister Circle for the Soul, it is a sacred space where people can feel free to bring their authentic selves. It's not recorded, but we definitely want to bring those gems to the public arena, and that's what we'll do today.
All right. So without further ado, Jennifer, this was a little bit different. We got deep, and I mean like deep. We went heavy. How are you feeling after that?
A mix of emotions, right? A mix of emotions. You know, the Sister Circle for the Soul space, we always get into stuff that means something. People definitely share their hearts. People find things that resonate with them, and things can be liberating in that sense. I think today was the same. I think today was definitely liberating, but you know, we've got a lot of things happening with the protests for equality that are going on. Position that next to the different kind of things happening in the office, us having to now be therapists for other people, and then how are we handling our own emotions, our own conflicts, our own burdens. And I think that we found just a lot of emotion in the room in some of those places, but I think it was something that need to be said and need to be shared, and I think we're better for it.
Absolutely. So for those who didn't get an opportunity to actually tune in, we talked about today in defense of the Black man. We're leading up to Father's Day coming up here in a couple of weeks, or not a couple of weeks, but a couple of days actually. And in the midst of everything happening with George Floyd and the murder, how the country erupted. We were just talking about how to balance our emotions, and something that was said during the call was we as Black women are good at compartmentalizing. And so Jennifer, can you just kind of walk us into that, and just what was the context of that?
Absolutely. I think we're all trying to make it, right? I think we're all trying to survive. And what we found is that in the effort to stay strong during COVID, and the effort to still stay strong while being employed or not being employed, maybe even being furloughed, in the effort to be strong for the various kind of movements that are happening right now, it's a lot. And what we're having to do is compartmentalize. The danger about that is that we actually end up separating from ourselves. We're having to disconnect from our own emotions, and it doesn't allow us to stay in tune with our own wellness. And because of that, we can find ourselves in some very difficult places and some very dangerous places.
Right. I want to stay there for a minute. Someone had brought up being disconnected, and then someone else brought up being distracted. And then there was another about how there are certain white people who are deflecting. And so we've got, in the midst of this this struggle that we're having, and this need to feel balanced, but we don't want to go, we want to get back to balance, but we don't want to go back to what things have been. We actually want to progress forward. Am I right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's where the difficulty is, right? We're being pulled in two different directions, but not just left and right, up and down, and every other axis that you can imagine. And we're continuing to have to operate in a multiplicity of roles, not having time to really process anything. And as great as it is that we're having these conversations, what we discovered in the talk, what we were able to share, is that in a lot of cases, it's even more of a burden, because now we're having to manage other people's emotions. Sometimes people who are reaching out to us, they're really not checking in, but they're texting because of guilt, right? And then having to still keep your composure when you're able to read through the facade or manage those emotions, or someone asking you, how do you solve my unawareness, right? We're still being tasked and burdened with heavy loads, and it can make things difficult.
Absolutely. I think one of the things said during Sister Circle for the Soul was, I can't wrap up 400 years of slavery in a text message. So a lot of us, and I loved that quote, but a lot of us have had some of our white friends, colleagues, previous coworkers reaching out, asking the question, what can I do? Have I ever offended you? And quite frankly, a lot of us are just exhausted. We don't want to talk about it. And I like what one of the ladies said in participation, where she said, when I wanted to inform myself about the Holocaust, I didn't go asking Jewish people. I picked up a book and I used Google. And so I thought that was important to say. What were your thoughts just in terms of what was labeled white guilt?
You know what, that's heavy, right? I think white guilt is real. I think when any of us, when we own our part in something, there can be this shock and this guilt and maybe even some shame.
Yeah.
And that's something that has to be worked out. So I appreciate everyone who's been brave to approach their colleague, to approach their friend and say, listen, I'm acknowledging that I've been blind in something. Can you help me see? Right? I think that's courageous. I think at the same time, there has to be an understanding that although some people are just realizing this, a lot of people, a lot of African Americans have been carrying it for a long, long time. So it's hard to, in the midst of our pain, in the midst of our own discomfort, we're now also having to provide emotional comfort to someone else. Yeah. And in the sense of, if I don't know what to do, just pull yourself back. What do we do when we have to figure out how to cook that meal? What do we do when we don't know how to get to that destination, right? We look it up. And that is what we can do. That is the advice that I would give people, to get educated and to listen, to acknowledge that just because something wasn't your experience doesn't mean that it's not real.
Absolutely. Yeah, to your point, pick up a book. I know, don't let me pick up a book, right? Don't master that thing. But aside from that, there was another comment that Black women give so much grace. And so in this discussion of in defense of the Black man, and also having to challenge some of the feelings and emotions that we were having, just in terms of our own personal relationships with Black men, whether that be your father or men that you have dated or your brothers or your children. I think what I'm looking forward to discussing that is how, I think one of the things that was said was, we just want empathy. And empathy, I think, just kind of sums up what today's Sister Circle for the Soul was really all about, and kind of walk us through that channel.
Absolutely. Well, we got into a number of things. We got into how are people relating to us, how we need people to hear us, how are we taking care of ourselves, how are we able to support the movement and deal with those feelings that came up because of all of the atrocities that we've seen recently. And some of those feelings, like you said, were, okay, I have unresolved feelings with Black men in my life, and I'm being reminded when I see these images on TV. So not only am I dealing with systemic racism, I'm also thinking about the brokenness that I have experienced personally, that's also oftentimes a symptom of the systemic racism, right? And so the cornerstone to all of that, the thread that moves through all of that, is empathy. We're wanting people who don't understand us, who don't understand what it's like to be us, to empathize and to listen. And in that, we also have to take a look at ourselves and slow down and quiet down and have empathy for ourselves, give ourselves some grace, because these times are difficult. You know, one person talked about, hey, they have these various kinds of things to promote balance, but they had to get a therapist because times are hard right now. And that's legitimate. And it's important to recognize that and to be in touch with oneself. And with that being said, there has to be release. There has to be resolution. What does that mean? We have to look at those avenues within, or places within our own lives, the people, the men within our own lives, and start to understand, you know what? Being a Black woman is hard. I'm connecting again with that, but I also don't know what it's like to be a Black man, because I'm not. And I could have shared the same home with you. We could share the same parents. We could share the same children, but your experience is unique. And so maybe there were times where you weren't able to show up for me because of everything else that you were dealing with. The alcoholism, the cheating, the whatever, those are symptoms of a larger issue connected to the racial systemic madness that has been going on for hundreds of years. And so even though we may not be able to fully understand, and we're definitely not validating where men have made mistakes, we also need to extend empathy there so that we can all find the healing that we're looking for.
Absolutely. I think something that came up during Sister Circle for the Soul was this discussion of value and reciprocation, and just how we need to identify value in each other as women, but then also identifying that value in men. And I like that there was something that, and I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was, Black men may not have the tools, or may not have been allowed the tools, or even the space to be who they are. And so how we need to be sympathetic to that. And that kind of opened up a discussion about the larger story, which is that systemic racism really has wrecked the Black family. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. It was a very strategic and calculated method to oppress slaves, where families were literally ripped apart. This is not metaphorical, right? Husbands were separated from their children, and wives, women were raped. There was a lot of stuff that happened where people lost their heritage. They didn't have their connection. They didn't have their history. And it was hard to create family bonds when your family members are being sold like cattle. Just imagine that, right? And so we finally get emancipated, according to legal documents, with some very distinct caveats. That's a whole nother conversation, right? And then with that being said, you have men who are still seeing this oppression, women who are still seeing this oppression. And the fact of the matter is that when you have something that has come against the family structure for hundreds of years, 50 years after, Jim Crow or whatever, is not going to just put everything together immediately.
Right. One of the things, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to say that, the brokenness that we see in the families, it's still connected to this systemic racism. Do people need to walk things out and heal from that? Yes, but we're looking at root causes, and we're looking at root causes for the need to not just cover up the symptoms of the brokenness, but to really address the root.
Right. I'm wholeheartedly sympathetic to that. I also heard one of the things mentioned during Sister Circle for the Soul was that the system was never set up for any of us to succeed, that being the Black man or the Black woman. And I think one thing that we as Black people have always been good at is survival, because we're still here. And we are now turning a page or a corner in America where we are now about to start thriving. We're the first generation of Black people who have been able to do that. So in the lead up to George Floyd, there was Amy Cooper and the Bird Watcher, and someone brought up weaponizing race, weaponizing color. And I like what you actually said in response to that. And you were like, we need to balance. We also need to basically balance the burden and
Yeah.
then begin to bridge empathy. And so I think my question to you, Jennifer, is where do we go from here? What are your thoughts on
Mhm.
that?
Wow, wow. I think first of all, that's an amazing question. And I think that it's very, very layered, and our time here doesn't allow us to get into all of it, right? Um, but I think the first thing that we need to do, we know that there's a lot of things going on out there, and we can't control it all. That is why I think we need to start here. We need to take a look at ourselves first and um, understand other people's walk and lives and extend that empathy, understanding that we don't understand it all, understanding that people, it's not just African Americans have been, um, you know, oppressed within this racial situation, right? And when I say oppressed, I fully acknowledge people who have made it, and that is amazing. But we're talking about a people.
Yes.
Overall, there is a people who have not been able to make gains financially and in society as a people. And when there were attempts to do so, they were quickly squashed in the early 1900s, right? We have Tulsa, Oklahoma, we have Rosewood, we have, I forgot the name of the city, but there was a city in Florida as well. Those are just three that I know. And there was one in California, right? Where people were able to do exactly what people say, get your economy, own things, make a city, be wealthy, prosper, and they were very maliciously squashed. So when it comes to where do we start, I think that we've got to start looking at ourselves. And the very thing that we're trying to have white people understand about their privilege, we also need to look at us and say, hey, what don't I know?
Yeah.
What don't I already see? And as we are able to empathize, I think we're going to see more similarities. And on those similarities, we're going to be able to join hands and have real conversation, real action, and real resolution.
Okay. So turning this on more of a funny turn, someone mentioned that white guilt is trending. And I think what's also trending is this conversation about race that we're having in our workplaces, but also at our dinner tables. One thing that you brought up in terms of that was forgiveness and how forgiving people allows us to be free. And again, we're turning a page and we're coming out of bondage. I think it was you, or I forget, one of our other board members had said, if we choose to not look past our pain, then who's really in bondage? And so I just want to juxtapose that bondage versus freedom. And can you maybe share with us, just in your own experience, how you've gotten free?
Absolutely. Wow, that's so much to say. I think when you're able to empathize and you're able to feel someone's humanity, you're able to give folks a little bit of slack. And I think that's what a lot of African Americans have done. I think that's what we've had to do. I think that's what we've had to do in order to have cordial and intelligent conversations with people, and even consoling them and managing their emotions, right? I also think, though, when it comes to forgiveness, I definitely have a personal role in this. And even in creating the show and creating this particular topic, as we were working together, as we were, changing this month's topic to make it more relevant to what was happening, we were going through just kind of like how the discussion was going to happen. And I had this aha moment. And I was like, you know what? Wait a minute. If I'm saying that there's a people who don't understand all of my struggles, and I need them to understand that their concept of privilege is different from my concept of privilege. Their concept of privilege is being rich with a silver spoon in their mouth. My concept of privilege is not being judged by the color of my skin, or even for men, the color of my skin not being not being weaponized against me, where someone sees me and I'm an immediate threat and they don't know me, right? But what I had to realize is that even though I'm African American, I don't know what it's like for my brothers. I don't know what it was like for my father. And so when I think about my relationship with my dad, when I think about the places where I saw him having to walk out that burden of being a Black man in America, I had to say, you know what? Maybe there was a reason why he wasn't able to do this, this, and this. Maybe he was carrying a burden that I had no idea about. And through that empathy and starting to understand, being able to forgive. And from that forgiveness, healing flows. Healing flows. And we need that amongst our people. We need that with other people. And I think from there is where we can start making some real progress.
Yeah, I think even with, I think hope floats, and this healing is just an anchor, if nothing else.
Very good.
I love that. So we're running out of time, but I do want to say that we do this every month. And have you had thoughts about what we may talk about next month for July?
Yes, we do this every month. And again, Sister Circle for the Soul is that safe place where people can talk about what's really, really relevant. And I think it also kind of springboards from this newfound revelation of just our social circles and social dynamics, and wanting to be seen and wanting to kind of have that seat at the table and equality. The conversation for July is taking your authority. And really what that is first the acknowledgement of self.
Yeah.
And feeling comfortable in your own skin, and to walk that out for the betterment of those around you. And I'm super excited to get into that conversation next month.
Well, hallelujah. I'm excited too. Just really quickly, Jennifer, let us know how we can find you.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook, all social media channels at Jen Anderson I Am. That's spelled JenAndersonisam. Feel free to DM me. If you'd like to learn more about what I do or would like to work with me, I look forward to hearing from you.
All right, that wraps up today's after show of Sister Circle for the Soul. Again, my name is Erin. She is Jennifer. Please come back. You can find Sister Circle Media at sistercirclemedia.org. You can also find us on Instagram at Sister Circle Media and everywhere else at Sister Circle Media. We look forward to engaging with you, and we also would love for Black women to join us. So, what's up? Jennifer, I'll see you next week.
Okay, sounds good. Bye, guys.